good afternoon, good evening, yWhales, wherever in the world you are today. Welcome to episode 7 of yWeb3, Navigating Frontier Tech. We're back with another episode with the latest developments and headlines from the rapidly evolving world of frontier tech and digital innovation. In today's episode, we'll dive through some of the intriguing developments. There's a call to action for a social media platform to tackle fraudulent crypto investment ads, aiming to keep users safe. We'll explore high-stakes trial that's capturing attention and adding an extra layer of complexity to the crypto world due to its potential implications, accompanied by the mounting legal costs involved. Transparency will take the center stage as a tech company's request for secrecy around its phone hacking technology raises eyebrows. Super excited for that one. Shifting focus will shine a light on the FBI's efforts in seizing crypto assets from scammers, highlighting the fight against cybercrime. A mysterious accumulation of Bitcoin worth a significant amount, billions, has questioning the origins and motives. We think we've figured out who it is, though. Additionally, we'll explore how the music industry is adopting AI-generated music, striving to maintain fairness for artists and creators. As we go forward, we'll take a closer look at decentralized social network that's making waves, generating impressive fees shortly after its launch. So join us today as we talk through with our new hosts on the yWeb3, Navigating Frontier Tech. So let's go ahead and start with you. We've got some amazing guest hosts today with us. Vivek, would you mind giving us a quick intro of your background and how you got here today?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me today, Jay. And I'm grateful to be on with both Cristian and Alex. I'm looking forward to it. So my name is Vivek Jayaram. I'm an attorney and entrepreneur. I've been practicing law for about 20 years, primarily in the areas of intellectual property and corporate law. I started my own practice after several years in big law, started my own practice in 2009 called Jayaram Law, where we really focus on fashion, new technologies, and art. Those are sort of the three big industries that we hit. And so in that time, the early days, there was a lot of focus on, stuff you could and could not do on social media, turned into some mobile app development, cryptocurrency. And I guess for the last 5 years or so, there's been, a focus on blockchain startups and all the things that have sort of emanated from that. Most recently, the sort of generative AI boom. So it's great to be here. Happy to talk about all this new stuff and hear some perspectives from some pros like Cristian and Alex.
Awesome. Yeah, no, thank you so much for coming on. And it's always fun to have a lawyer. We get a little bit of free legal advice, but there is no legal advice. Don't take any of this. We're just here. So especially investment advice.
For anybody, Jay.
Thank you so much. Cristian, how are you, sir?
Very good. Thanks for the intro, Jay. Also for the good words, Vivek. So happy to be here to give a bit of my knowledge, especially on the tech side, since I'm a technical co-founder. So my main, place of work, it's into the deep tech of crypto. I've been in the space probably a bit over 10 years in the crypto space, which I hold my PhD in privacy enhancing technology. That's my field of expertise. And currently I'm building this RPC infrastructure, which is very focused on decentralization and security, privacy, again, with the compliance on top of it, because it's very important to have them all in the same bucket. And very happy to join today's talk and to see how we can bring some light in some topics that we just saw a few minutes ago presented by Jay.
Awesome. Amazing. Alex, how are you, sir?
Hello. It's Alex. I am a co-founder and CEO of CharmVerse. CharmVerse is a Web3 community operations platform. Some call us the Web3 Notion or Web3 Discourse. I have been in tech for 20 plus years, starting off as a software developer, building software that you put on military drones. After doing that for a while, started my first company, and then second, and then now CharmVerse is the third. My first two companies are actually AI company. Actually, the second one having to be named X.AI, which after it got acquired, Elon eventually bought the domain. So now, Elon is using X.AI, strange well. And excited to be here. Love to talk more about crypto and AI at the same time.
You were ahead of the game, ahead of the curve, and it's amazing. Everyone's like suddenly like ChatGPT, AI is here, and it's like for someone like you, it's like no, I've been doing this for like decades. Like it is it came alive slightly. So it's interesting to hear, and yeah, it's probably pretty weird for so much time you spent on X.AI to now have Elon be like, no, this is mine. Fabulous, guys.
Well,
So again, the goal of today is conversational. We really want to walk through articles that we're seeing in the press, and the reason we do this is we have experts, true experts, that are working every single day in frontier tech, in Web3, blockchain, cryptocurrencies, AI, and everything else, to actually be able to help extrapolate and explain, kind of how these things are truthful, or where there's just a little bit of hype mixed in from the journalists. So let's start with I think one of the most important ones. Cryptocurrencies and blockchain was kind of in a tough way after Luna last year. We've been suffering from, are we going to have a crypto winter? Where's things going to be? And then kind of the poster boy for cryptocurrencies, Sam Bankman, suddenly this whole, thing unraveled, and it became a big deal, and, quite a bit happened. And so now Sam Bankman plans to use a defense strategy, citing advice from his new lawyers, to argue good faith in his case. He's intending to plead not guilty to his recent indictment, aiming to show that his actions, including fund loans, message deletions, were based on his legal counsel's advice. Sam Bankman's legal defense revealed the strategy through a letter, asserting his reliance on counsel's advice as relevant to intent. Again, as I am not a lawyer, but I do understand. We have a VC fund. yWhales has a cryptocurrency, or not a cryptocurrency, but we have a traditional VC fund aimed around Web3, blockchain, and frontier tech. I've spent a lot of time with lawyers in the space and have done a number of startups. Vivek, I'm going to kind of jump on you for this one, but I generally think that the easiest way to not get in trouble is never touch client funds. It seems to be relatively simple, except for cryptocurrency companies seem to be confused about this.
Yeah. So let's back up for a second in terms of the beginning of your question. So he's relying, he's been charged with fraud, right? So, and the long and short of it is, if you put your money with FTX, obviously him and the company did some advertising and marketing to reach you, and you ended up, trusting your money with them. And then if he's using your client money for things that you never agreed to have it used for, right, in writing, such as funding other ventures, other funds, things like that, right, that would, seems to be a pretty good case for fraud, right? Now, what he's arguing in this, in this story that you're referring to, is that, well, in order to be charged and be convicted for fraud on a criminal level, there needs to be some, what we call, the Latin term is mens rea, but some state of mind, right? You had to sort of intend to do something bad. If you didn't really intend to do something bad, but something bad happened, right? Well, then maybe you breached a contract, maybe you breached your fiduciary duty. You could be sued in civil court. But if you're getting prosecuted by the U.S. Attorney's Office, which is what is happening here, usually requires some level of intent. So what he's saying is, hey, listen, I didn't have any intent to defraud anybody, because before I did anything, or before I sort of executed and implemented, the FTX business model, I asked my lawyers if I could do this. And it sounds like what he's saying is they presumably said, yeah, you can, right? Usually, Jay, I will say two things on this point, right? We haven't seen the evidence, and I would love for all the listeners need to understand we're talking about a federal crime and a federal case here. So you got to pay attention to the evidence, not necessarily the headlines and the pundits and things like that, right? So as a first step, right, when we were talking about an indictment in federal court, right, the U.S. Attorney's Office getting involved, why is it that federal prosecutors rarely lose? Rarely, right? And it's largely because they don't really indict unless they have the evidence to win their case, right? There's a big universe of investigations that are ongoing at any given time, right? Ones we know about, other ones we don't know about, right? But the ones that are ultimately reduced to an indictment, right? Mm-hmm. That's a smaller universe. And usually that's the universe of crimes that the prosecutor believes that they have a good deal of evidence in order to win, right? And you might say, well, don't people get convicted of things all the time for things they didn't do? Well, yes, people do. And, wrongful convictions are a real thing in the U.S. And there's a lot of great organizations like the Innocence Project that are dealing with those cases all the time. But by and large, on the federal side, particularly for financial crimes, right, the feds probably have some good evidence before issuing an indictment, right? So that's something to bear in mind for everybody to bear in mind, right? On the advice of counsel, right, usually that kind of defense can be effective if you have good evidence. If you've got a letter from your lawyer that says, yeah, your business model is to take money over here and put it over here, park it over here for a while before you pay these people back. Okay, that might go to some distance to helping him in terms of like what the ultimate penalty might be, what the ultimate sentencing might be, right? Hey, he can't be that bad of an actor. He was just relying on his lawyer's, counsel. But is it enough to exonerate him from these crimes? The evidence will bear it out, right? And we've seen articles that say there are text messages, there are emails between Bankman-Fried and others within FTX that seem to suggest that like he's moving shit around, pretty frivolously, right?
Yeah,
but got to look and see what actually bears out at trial, right? Is the direction that he was giving to others on his team really only with advice from his lawyers? And there is a chance, depending on what that advice was. We've seen this now in the Trump indictment, right? If the advice given by the lawyers itself rises to some kind of fraudulent conduct, well, then those lawyers could end up being indicted as co-conspirators to the entire fraud, right? So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, the thing that I love about your statement is, there's a lot of evidence that has to be, played out, and we're going to see they're going to broadcast this thing, and it's going to be a big court case because it involves billions of dollars of, and people's life savings were put on FTX. One of the things that I think is very interesting and also telling of where this case is going is that Sam was out on bond and he's now violated those terms. So he has trouble, understanding legal documents, clearly something there. So I think it shows a pattern. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know anything. I'm very familiar with the case. I've spoken to a lot of insiders around FTX, and I think it's going to be very hard for Sam to get out of this because there's clearly intent. He's saying he's of sound mind and body. The drugs that he was on, and they're extensive. We now know his routine. He's on quite a bit of Adderall and other drugs, so he's able to stay awake and pay attention. But I think it really is going to be interesting to see as this case progresses. What the level of fraud really was, because when you're commingling funds, and that was what was, the base of this is, people were depositing where they thought was in Alameda, but it was actually FTX, and he had control over FTX because that's his company. And so there's, those are kind of the disclosures, as we know, setting up a fund, like, there's got to be a firewall between these things. You cannot, not disclose that, hey, we're commingling funds. So yeah, that'll be an interesting one.
And you hit it on your head. I mean, whether you're a lawyer, an accountant, fund manager, right? These are the positions that often, what comes along with it is a fiduciary and other obligations to act responsibly, right? And I just want one last thing I'd say on this, Jay, is the press loves to make this about crypto, right?
Yeah, this is not a crypto issue.
Yeah, and if I think back to actually among the first clients that I ever worked with in my career, I was working at a very big corporate law firm. We were defending all the fallout from Jack Grubman way back then, the Citibank money manager, which is not that different than what we saw a few years later, Bernie Madoff, right? Yep. Those were not crypto situations. So Elizabeth Holmes did what she did, and we're not giving up on biotech. So I think it's important for us to see that there are fraudsters in every industry, right? And if it is a classic Ponzi, which this seems like it might have been, right? That's really what it is, and that's where the prosecutor's focus is going to be. The press might be focusing on cryptocurrencies and blockchain and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, it's just like, what was he allowed to do with the money, and what was he doing with the money? When I say he, it's because he is sort of the chief executive officer. He's an officer and director of the company, and so that's why he is getting prosecuted. Although there may have been a whole group of people at FTX that were involved, and that's also part of what we're going to see play out at the trial.
And right now, the defense lawyers, the lawyers that are kind of putting FTX back together and trying to figure out, are burning about $1.5 million a day. So about $50 million a month are going into this case. So it is large, it is extravagant, and the one thing I always say about legal cases is, at the end of the day, the lawyers win. that's like, right, wrong, indifferent. There's a lot at stake here. And I think I just say for anyone who's lost money in FTX or had money locked up, I hope you get it back very soon. And this is one of those things where, regulatory wise, they were following, a lot of laws. But behind a couple closed doors, there was a couple bad actors, and that's a really hard thing to spot. So it's very sad for the industry. And I agree. It's not a crypto issue. There was no scam coin, kind of rug pull here. This was like a true failure of governance and oversight. So, Alex, you've raised a lot of funds. You've done a bunch of this stuff. To me, it's just common sense. Like, when someone says, "Hey, I'd like to invest in your project. I want to, I want to do this." Like, that's not your piggy bank. Like, I would never think to give myself a loan of investor funds.
That's the thing. It seems so basic. It is unthinkable of like the scale and the level of what happened, and all the anecdotes that comes out. Again, I follow tertiarily on the side, like the cases, but yeah, just little tidbits of fact that comes out. It's like, oh yeah, we don't have a accounting system. It's like, yeah, it's all in Excel sheets and stuff like that, managing billions of dollars. It's like, what in what planet is this happening? And kind of to your point, where's the governance? Where are the people that are supposed to be at least bringing some tiny version of guardrail on what should be happening, what shouldn't be, and the amount of investor dollars that actually goes into the project, which is it's mind-boggling.
Yeah, absolutely. So jumping over, one of the that was a scam. We'll not label what FTX is right now, but clearly there's issues there. But there are a number of scams. Rug pulls, coins, and some are meme coins, and some are designed to be rug pulls. Some are actually just really poorly written contracts. And so right now, and I think it's good for countries to take action against these. And so Thailand is warning Meta, Facebook, or whatever they're calling themselves nowadays, that they have to kind of get ahead of these advertisements. They have to get ahead of the, you cannot promote a scam coin, you cannot promote cryptocurrencies that aren't regulated in certain ways, or they're going to be entirely shut off, Meta and Facebook, from Thailand. I think that's a win. I think that there's, to me, I'm a kind of, sorry, Alex, I'm kind of an anti-social media guy at this point, having a teenager and an 11-year-old. But the side effects of this, I think, are really relevant, that there has to be some gatekeeper looking for these things. And I'm not saying, hey, any cryptocurrency, but there has to be validity. And I think part of this is these dark teams. You don't know who's behind it. It pops up. I see all the time when I'm on Twitter, like, SpaceX token launching, and it's using, Elon's, face and everything else. And I'm like, how do they allow this? How does this happen? Cristian, I'm just going to jump to you real quick on this one, because you understand smart contracts better than anyone. You understand, blockchain and the intricacies of what's a safe smart contract and what's not. What would be the best way for, a company like Facebook to audit? Is it even possible for them to audit these coins before they're listed or advertised?
Yeah, there are technical means how to do it. I think the bigger concern for them is how to map that specific smart contract to the ads that it's actually actively being pushed by the platform, right? Because it happens with other scams, not specifically in Web3 and tokens and meme coins and stuff. I've seen this back in my government position in defense when I'm watching of cases. You have this behavior where it's very obfuscated, so it's hard for the people that it's being like broadcast by the ad. Even might be a platform that is being hacked, and actually the system that is pushing ads, it's not aware of the ads that is being pushing. So it's a bit more complex for them to see who is behind of this. But once you get your hand on the smart contract, there are technical solutions that can be used in order to see what actually the code does in a very broad, let's say, manner. And I think the way how this can be helpful in the space is to make it very simple for the general user, because if you look over the scams that happened or rug pulls, you'll see the majority of the users are the ones that don't have specific knowledge in the space. So if you make it very hard to understand it or to use it, you need to expect probably below 5% rate of those using it. So that's why I think the ones like the channels that access the blockchain, interact with the blockchain, should enforce those measures towards it. And we've seen different projects out there that are starting to do this, from honeypot protection, token sniffers. They can look on the smart contract and tell you if it's a buy tax, a sell tax, or if it's a honeypot, you send the money in and you cannot put it out, right? So there are means how to do it, but I think one big challenge is to educate the community how to use them and what's the role of them. But a giant like Meta or any social platform, I think they're able to integrate it. I think it's just a matter of priority and how they are a thing to be synced with those, let's say, ads and what is pushing. But obviously, once you start to do that, you'll see a decrease in revenue. So probably that's the case where most, let's say, big platforms are not pushing this as a priority. That's my take on the case.
You know, and I love that concept. And Alex, I'm going to ask you as an AI expert, because, you know, right now, if I go ahead and it used to be kind of science fiction, but if I made a kind of a video or, you know, recorded, you know, one of my kids and there was, you know, music in the background, you know, it would just play. And nowadays, you know, you do that and upload to YouTube, they'll flag it, you know, and say, nope, we recognize the song, we recognize what's on the screen, and we're going to go ahead and you know, the tools exist, you know, to do it with music, to do it with, you know, movies, to do it with, you know, a lot of different content. We see YouTube and everyone else kind of managing this. Blockchain's transparent, you know, shouldn't they be able to design some tools to be able to do the exact same thing of like, okay, you're advertising a coin, point to the contract of which you want people to mint on and allow them to audit that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, so actually I would step back quite a bit, right? And talk about everything comes down to actually economics, right? If you look back from actually one of the first real world application of AI is spam filters for emails, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a single simple classification, like is this email spam, not spam? And for the longest time, like we as a society had enormous problem with spam mail, right? For us old enough to remember that, right? This is, you know, whatever spam filter software that you buy, the scammer like learned to figure that out, and they like it's a cat and mouse game. They're like, you know, because it's almost costless to send another email to spam you, right?
Yeah.
So it's easy to do, and therefore they can send billions of emails to different accounts. It'd be worth it. Now, until Google came up being able to figure out that, you know, using Gmail and using, you know, many millions of people using Gmail and they're marking emails as spam, and all of a sudden is that cat and mouse game got automated for the most case, right? That cat and mouse game, all of a sudden it is not nearly as economical to send spam mail anymore. And I mean, of course, we still get spam now and here and there, but like it's effectively eliminated, right? In email, like it's not really a big problem nowadays when you and I have an email account, right?
Yeah, not what it used to be. Exactly.
Well, not what it used to be. And it's very much the same thing when it comes to a blockchain scam, because I think contract is one thing, but it is a multifaceted thing, right? Like, so like, I'm on Twitter, like the second I start talking about some project, immediately there's a bunch of fake, you know, profile and have, you know, 10,000 followers, right? So like, look legit, except when you compare to the real account, it's like, you know, 100,000 followers. So they misspelled the name and so on and so forth. And those are nothing to do with contract, and it's all reputation and so on and so forth. And I think the problem right now and how early Web3 is that for spamming you in emails, you know, the best you can do is like get you to click on the link, and eventually 6 clicks later, somehow you give away your credit card info or your bank account, right? For crypto, your email address or your identity is also your wallet of all your money and all your asset in the same place, potentially, right?
Yeah.
So it just makes that economics so much better for the spammer, for the schemer, that like they only have to get one, and then, you know, it's a big score compared to email in the old days. So I think like, yeah, if it comes down to it, is like, what are the multiple things that we can do? You know, yeah, recognizing contract address is one of those, but I think it is a multifaceted thing, and a lot of it is actually human engineering. Or like, how can you tell like this person or this account or this page that people are putting up in front of you are actually real before you connect your wallet. So yeah, I think it's a multi-layer
Yeah, and
solution.
I think it highlights one of the biggest issues I have right now in Web3 is it's not safer. Like the idea of self-custody, I think if you're Christian, like, I would trust him that he can manage his coins. Like I struggle. I really do. I like the idea of custodians. I like the idea that someone else is liable, especially if we're talking large amounts. And I know, same as you guys probably get calls. I get calls. I've seen everything of people losing thousands, all the way up to over $100 million. I've seen funds lost. And so and some of these are some of the incredibly competent people. And it just happens. It happens so quickly, and there's so many things. But, jumping back to this issue, trying to kick an entire, Facebook out of Thailand, I mean, it must be serious. And so, Vivek, clearly I would say that Meta has the money to investigate it. I don't think that they're maliciously ignoring it. But if the technology is available, I mean, they can be compelled to at least put in some steps to warn, people that, cryptocurrencies are generally more dangerous than other, buy a hairbrush or a makeup ad.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, and I appreciate your perspective, Alex. Those are interesting. I think that, a lot of this comes down to this Section 230 issue, right? That I think we've all been like kind of waiting for some movement on for like probably almost a decade at this point, right? Where it's like, to what degree can these, platforms or marketplaces or, social media, sites or whatever, to what degree can they be responsible for the activity of the users, right? And, for a long time, we were on the innovation train of, hey, let's just let them build and let the people come and do whatever they want. And if somebody does something bad, we will just go after that person, right? And I think to some degree, I think the culture, and I think at least the American society is probably ready for some more regulation around that, right? We maybe tried it this sort of Wild West way for a while, and maybe it's getting us into a little bit more trouble than we thought. And Jay, you mentioned you have a 13 and 11-year-old. I got a 12 and 6-year-old, so I understand for parents of these children who are coming of age in this environment. Something more needs to be done. I mean, I don't have a solution here today because, where I run into this a lot is really on the intellectual property side, right? Mm-hmm. Because now counterfeiters have become so remarkably smart and savvy, right? And so, but if you are smart enough to like build a marketplace and then have people, traffic and counterfeit goods on that marketplace, the current law might allow you to shield yourself from a lot of that activity, right? And so I don't know what it is, because what we also don't want to do is, to your point, Jay, if the technology is available, for example, to make Meta do a little bit more diligence on the front end before allowing advertisers to release content, okay, that's great. And maybe that's a good solution for like Meta, but like, what about, the next startup that Alex funds that maybe doesn't have, or, Cristian gets involved in, that doesn't have the resources of a Meta to leverage that technology, right? Then are we sort of stomping on innovation in a way that we also don't want, as a community, right? So these are not easy solutions, but like, I think we can all agree something has to be done, right?
Yeah.
And so
I completely agree. And while it's not part of this article, or I don't think we have it listed here, we saw Shibu Inu, who's a meme token. There's no value to it whatsoever outside of, people wanting it for some reasons. They decided that a group of anonymous people was going to build their own chain. And again, hey, no problem here, except for mass levels of incompetence, meaning that they built a bridge. The bridge failed immediately. They lost over 5,000 ETH, and they're literally they posted like, "Oops, we messed up." But we're going to keep going, and we think that it's going to get better over time. And so these are the kind of issues that I really want to face. Is like, this is not what Web3 is supposed to be. Can anyone build a website? Right now, Web2, absolutely. But can anyone have a financially regulated bank? I think that, consumer protection has to be first. And, just the fact that you can do it doesn't mean that you should do it. And I think we have so many investors that are desperate, and I think that that's that issue that we see these coins prey on is people that are out of desperation, that they're looking for the 1,000x return. And we've seen this, with FTX and others, people are willing to make bets, and it turns into gambling more than investments. And, I'm not going to get into disclosures and reg tech here because that's going to go down the wrong path.
Right.
But yeah,
It's
please.
different, right, than what's happened before in a Bernie Madoff situation.
Yeah.
All these people, right? It's just like, so maybe part of it though is like, this is just the like bumpy road of new technology, right? Because as Alex said, which I appreciate, right? Hey, there need to be some guardrails with like FTX, right? But I think what the government can do and what they are doing is, okay, here we found a big fish, FTX, no guardrails. Let's publicly punish them to deter other, entrepreneurs from kind of running their ship the same way as, Sam Bankman-Fried, right? So maybe what it's going to take is a few prosecutions against folks who were reaching consumers through Facebook, possibly, right? And maybe then that, because what we've seen in the counterfeiting world, which is not that different from like the financial fraud world, is when you start doing a certain kind of enforcement, the fraudsters don't stop being fraudsters. They just move away into a different kind of fraud, right? So if you see more prosecution, directed and targeted towards, crypto fraud or, something like that, you might essentially be forcing those folks out of crypto, which is, I think, what we want. And so that is one other way to try to deal with this.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's pivot over, because I think, talking about transparency and security is really important. And that's one of the things I want to highlight here in this next article is a phone hacking company, Cellebrite, is urging law enforcement users to keep their technology confidential. Leaked training video reveals that the company's request for secrecy, prompting concerns among legal experts regarding transparency for judicial oversight, defendants' rights. Critics argue withholding information about powerful surveillance tools hampers defense and public rights. Cristian, I'm going to come to you on this one, but I think this really, I hate the idea of SMS 2FA. And there's a lot of people that still rely on SMS 2FA. And in fact, there's some websites and specifically some cryptocurrency blockchain ones that don't give you the option to use your own authenticator. But if this is the case, if you truly, there's this much transparency that they can hack in at the core level and intercept any of those messages, then SMS 2FA is, correct me if I'm wrong, just entirely irrelevant and needs to be stopped.
Yeah, definitely. And back to the point with the SMS and two-factor authentication using that channel, I think a few papers with more than a decade in the space, and now it's so easy and cheap to perform such an attack like spoofing an SMS gateway. It's so easy, and probably the hackers move to a way of approaching like a business, because they offer you different models. Even if you're a non-knower, have no idea how to use it, it's like on the darknet, you pay a few cents and it's per usage or something related to that model, right? So it becomes very accessible, even for the scammers and the people that don't understand the technology. And I think we should have ways of choosing the second factor in a more secure way, either hardware or authenticator, even that probably that some authenticator already have backup in cloud. There is another, let's say, possible breach right there, but assuming that the security of that model of backup it's right, then probably it's best than having the 2FA as an SMS. Now back with the case with Cellebrite, it's a very known, at least in the space of intelligence, right? I know that they cracked the phone with Apple. It was a long story behind when they have evidence and they couldn't manage to extract it, and this company was able to extract, and not for so long, because I played with this tool. I've used it in my work in the government, and until at some point it wasn't possible to acquire one on a, let's say, not public company, so only the governments could buy it, but from I don't know exactly the number of years, it's possible for any company to buy it. So it's probably from that reason, it's obvious that they try to maintain it under the radar. And I think, in my opinion, with public knowledge, The reason of why they're doing that is once you put a light on the technology, obviously, exactly how we mentioned earlier, hackers can look over what are the tools and having eviction methods, how not to use it. For example, if you're discovering, let's say, a method of extracting data from a phone, let's say from iOS 12 or 14.1 or whatever version, guess what? Apple will know that, and I think in a matter of weeks they'll have an update that will no longer be the case of doing that. So if you're making more under the light, then the people that could issue updates and fix them, that's on the good side. They can see it and they somehow break the business model because those tools will not work anymore, at least in that case. And on the others, with hackers and stuff, they see how the data can be extracted, and probably that's the case where they want to be a bit hidden, not in the open space to know the technology that's being used behind. But what I can say with the tool that it's under Cellebrite, you can basically pull out the data, any type of data that you want, even location, where it be not, because every time you have your phone on, it connects to cells, right? Mobile cells. And it stores the geolocation of that cells. And that could presume later on like an evidence. Let's say you're saying that you're currently in Bucharest, Romania, but at the specific timestamp, you have a geolocation, let's say, I don't know, in France, in Paris, right? So it could be in a useful way, but in the same time, if people are aware how the things are probably used in that matter, they can implement stuff to avoid those. So I don't know exactly what's the reason why they're like suggesting this, but I think one way to do it, because the more sustainable way is to be transparent and like the strong to be from the quality of the, let's say, algorithms, and it's better to have them public and very strong rather than obscurity. Like security by obscurity, it's something that is not longer, let's say, it works in our times, right? If you look over, let's say, RSA, which has more like 30 years since it has been built, right? It's still secure to this date. And one of the reasons is that so many people have take a look on the paper on how it works, mathematicians, informations, and lots of stuff, and they couldn't find a method to break it, right? So that's why it's so strong, because it's open and all the smart people can look over and came up with solutions. And if after 30 years there is no solution to break it, it means that it's secure, right? So I think that's the highest level of security in the space.
So real quick on that note, and just a question, if Apple, which generally I believe is more secure than Android or any of these other ones, but Apple's very secret about their code and whatnot. Is there, should you just not use mobile? I don't do mobile blockchain anything. Like I just like it's got to be on a computer with a VPN, and generally you get into air gapping some things and everything else. But would you just say don't use cell phones associated with cryptocurrency accounts, which kind of defeats parts of the purposes?
Yeah, I would say yes. And the reason of doing that is because the hardware beneath it, it's not secure as a hardware wallet, right? So mobile are very susceptible to different kind of malware, and because it relies a lot on the authentication of the user, and mostly we're talking here non-biometric. I think the percentage of people that are using biometrics to lock their phone, it's very low. And I think the way how Apple uses the technology with encryption, and one key strong here of Apple is that they're producing both the software and the hardware, and they're able to make a great fit from a security point of view. I know exactly how a chip works, right? It has a key which is being generated inside. So that means that even Apple has no idea of the key inside the chip, and the chip is in such a way that if you try to stick it or like defoil it, it will overburn itself. So it will radish the key immediately, right? So those measures are very good, but unfortunately, when you generate, let's say, a mobile wallet, let's say you're using for Bitcoin or whatever, the key that is being generated, unfortunately, is not saved into that specific part of the chip. That's one of the, let's say, drawbacks at the moment. Not to speaking about other Android phones or other, let's say, or stuff. But
yeah,
I would avoid it and trying to use the application that store that data with that key that it cannot be extracted. Authenticators are currently using that key, and even if your backup is in cloud, you're using that key alongside with your password in iCloud, which is secure if you're not put it on a sticky note on your computer or somewhere where it can be seen.
And as always, generally people will be surprised about how poor most people's security is around this stuff for ease of compliance. But it's true, the phones are insecure. Make sure you've got a good authenticator and a hardware wallet, no matter what you're doing. Just not ledger updating to the cloud. But the one of the concepts that people had around this, Alex, was Worldcoin. They're like, hey, we're going to give you a wallet. We're going to scan your iris. Every iris is its own individual snowflake. There can never be two of the exact same. And it's been, I would say, I'm not going to say a failure rollout, but it's definitely, in my opinion, not been a success. A lot of people are very upset with it. We have countries banning it for a variety of reasons, and I think the biggest thing that we've seen is just the scams already around it. That in poorer countries, they would go line up entire villages and just say, hey, we're going to scan your iris and we're going to give you like $1 to do this. And then they would take the Worldcoin worth $10 and go sell that on the market. So it entirely defeats the point of this stuff, correct?
Yeah. So, first of all, even actually from some of our earlier discussion, right? Like this being able to tell who you are, there is real value to that, right? That being able to know that you're a real human being when you're posting certain things, there is value to that. And the Worldcoin is an attempt to tackle that. But then on the flip side of that is that, I think we as a society, this happened before crypto, right? Like, if you go and survey out there, and then this happened over the years, that you ask if people worry about or they care about privacy, they always say yes. And always answer is yes. They care deeply, very highly care about privacy. Only until you put something that they have to trade against it, such as a free account on Facebook, a free email account, or free really anything. They're more than willing to trade off that privacy that they have. So really should be no surprise that now someone's going to give you hard-earned dollars, $1, $10, $25. And they just want to, scan your eyes. Seems like free money.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, it seems it's just obvious. Of course, that's going to happen, and we're just arbitraging humanness to the poorest country, right? Yeah. Which is just super skeevy when it comes down to it.
Yeah, it's a very interesting project. I don't endorse it in any way. We've had people on the show that have done it, and they're like, great, whatever the case is. But clearly, I would say it's a long way from mainstream at this point. Let's jump over and jump back to Bitcoin. The true pioneer in the space. The reason blockchain existed before Bitcoin, but Bitcoin is the monster whale that kind of moves us through. And we're seeing some of the big institutions finally adopt Bitcoin as a store of value, and I think that's a win for all of us. Whether you're into meme coins or you're just into blockchain, it's good to see institutions adopting Bitcoin. And so what's interesting is that we have that level of transparency on blockchain. You can see a wallet. We may not know who owns it, but generally we can see what they're doing, who they're transacting with, and there's some really good sleuths that are generally able to figure out who owns these things over time. And if it's a big enough target, not only do they want to identify it, but they want to hack it. They want to social engineer it or a variety of things. And so according to data, a wallet began accumulating about mid-May, and by late June, it is now the biggest Bitcoin whale in the world, and it has accumulated a little over $3 billion worth of Bitcoin into a single wallet. And I've got a couple questions for the panel here. Number one, why in the world would you ever put that much, currency in a single wallet, which is and two, have we identified this person yet? So let's go to Vivek first. What's your thoughts on seeing this much crypto in a single, is it protected by a single 12-word hash? Yeah,
we've been talking so much about fraud and hacking. I would think that this, is pretty visible news for a lot of fraudsters out there, right? So,
yeah, like, would you like to be a target? Here you go.
So there's that. I mean, yeah. I mean, beyond that, I guess it's there, and it's got that value. I don't know why anybody would need that much, or why anyone would choose to keep that much in one account, which makes me wonder. I mean, I guess I would defer to Alex and Cristian, because the question I would have is, is it possible that, like, that wallet itself showing that amount of value in and of itself is just a fraud? I mean, it's on blockchain, right? So you would think it's
reliable. I mean, it's real Bitcoin. It's there. So it's, to me, it's like there's no cost to have, like, the cost to have, one Bitcoin wallet is the same cost to have 100,000 of them. They've created.
The only thing I can think of, it's an outrageous flex by somebody really stupid who's inviting, potentially a lot of, hacking and counterfeiting, like, coming their way. But I don't know.
Yeah. Cristian, you want to take this one? And what I'm sure that when you saw this article, you immediately went into blockchain sleuth mode to figure out who it was.
Yeah, so I did a research and I didn't actually found any leads yet. But it's good that there's a community like Arkham right there. I don't know how good is the platform. I'm not like having any engage of this. I'm saying that it's good that there are means of identifying, let's say, big wallets, or at least the ones that are in the space and could lead to significant changes in the markets, and at least what it counts after that. So on my research, I used a tool that it's used especially in compliance to see how the things are rolled one together, but I could not find any data around it. So so far I'm in the blind. But what I think regarding the wallet, it's a bit weird that it's in a single address, because if you look over other chains, for example, Ethereum, where we have smart contracts like Gnosis and others, which are on smart contract, right? Then you can have a scheme 3 people out of 5, or a different scheme that it adds you more security, or at least flexibility around that. So if you lost that key, it's gone, right? 3 billions are locked for forever. My thinking is that the person behind it's institutional, and it has a good solution. If it's like not stupid, it has a solution probably with MPC, multi-party computation, where the key actually is split among multiple parties, and the level of security, let's say, is sufficient enough to, not smart, that to be okay to hold 3 billion in a single address. So that's my take, and why I'm thinking that the person or entity, it's institutional behind this address. Even that with MPC, it's not so easy. If you MPC, it's for the people which are not probably aware of, it's a technology which allows you to split a key in multiple parts. And if you want to perform any action, you need all the parts to work together. And let's say we can split a key in 4 parts. And if we want to send out, let's say, the Bitcoin from this address, all 4 of us need to cooperate together. And if one of us loses the key, it's gone. You can no longer do anything out of that. But the good news is that you can have multiple approaches, like 5 out of 7 out of 10. So you can still have some flexibility, but it's still very risky.
Yeah, and we're at yWhales, we're a Fireblocks user. I love and endorse Fireblocks consistently. So if you're managing well under $3 billion, and you just go, look, I want to be able to sleep at night, and I don't want to do Gnosis or any of these other types of wallets, like, it's a great solution. And you can have auto balancing type things that move it across multiple wallets. But I don't know anyone that would do this on purpose. Because the other side of this, and Alex, to jump in here, as an AI expert, the holy grail of quantum computing is eventually coming. And I think that's the biggest, concern that a lot of us in blockchain are going to have is, true quantum computing. Not like, hey, it's a little bit faster or whatever the case is, but like true quantum computing, theoretically can break these things, in hours or minutes.
I mean, granted, I think we have to completely rethink the world when true quantum computing come about, because it basically breaks all encryption, right? So, and forget about crypto. It's all of our digital daily life. That includes basically all financial related items and communications, and not many other use cases will completely, the paradigm would be completely shifted. Like there's many things that we depend on all of a sudden like no longer can be relied upon. So that's certainly a big problem. But yeah, I do think that like this is less about. I personally cannot think of a operational efficiency or smartness in doing this. I gotta think there's some kind of message, right? Like it's a flex, it's a way to show off, way to other things than making it more fault tolerant or more secure
I will be
to secure that $2 billion.
Yeah, I saw a couple of people thinking, this is Robinhood, this is an exchange. I'm gonna be really clear. I will be floored if this is an exchange and someone's gonna get fired for doing this. Because I agree with you. It's most likely a flex. It's they've got some I don't even know. Like it could be, there's large family offices that are worth 20, 30, $40 billion. And somebody could say, hey, Billy, will you just put a bunch of Bitcoin in our wallet? And the dude's got a single hardware key. And he's just like, I don't know, this is what I'm doing. I mean, it literally could be something as silly as that, where they were told, take 10% of our net worth and we've got $30 billion, go put $3 billion in a wallet because we don't want to manage it. This is a storage thing. But, again, and we'll have the quantum computing talk a little bit later. Let's stick with AI, and I think it's really interesting to see this. Currently, Hollywood is on strike, and they're listing a lot of reasons. But if you kind of push all those away, I think there's a lot of fear of AI. Because let's be clear, Hollywood's been struggling for a while. There's a lot of very thin plots that are very not great. So YouTube unveils the YouTube Music AI Incubator to address the impact of AI technology in the music industry. The initiative involves collaboration with artists, songwriters, producers to develop a compensation structure for AI-generated music. Universal Music Group is partnering with YouTube to address the challenge of using artists' work for AI model training without proper compensation. YouTube hints at an implementation system similar to a content ID to ensure rights holders are paid for their AI music usage. This is a big deal, and I think there's a lot. I've had so many conversations with this because AI has to be trained, and it generally isn't going to make up something from scratch. It's generally going to go with hey, take the last top 100 songs and generate me a new one, and it comes up with some really good stuff. And we've seen some amazing innovation by AI. It's just going to continue to get better and better and better. But if you're using it to train off people's rights, how can they be compensated? How can they be rewarded? Because if the next hit song, generates, $100 million, but it used somebody else's work to do so, there's already, Vivek, we'll jump to you real quick and then we'll go to Alex. I mean, there's already, clear paths on how this is supposed to work. But right now there's no transparency in what AI is using to make, to kind of generate these things.
Yeah, I mean, this is, as you mentioned, hugely important. Reminding me a little bit of the Napster into iTunes, evolution a couple decades ago. So, I mean, I think what YouTube is trying to do here, which in Universal as well, and I've also talked with folks in both those camps about this. I mean, they're really just obviously trying to get ahead of the avalanche of litigation now that is already started over the next and will continue on for the next few years. And there's really two things that we're talking about, right? On the one hand, you've got the Sarah Silverman case and a bunch of other ones where plaintiffs are suing, Google and Midjourney, Stability AI, all the other AI tools out there for the practice of essentially scraping, right? So saying, hey, you can't train your AI with my copyrighted content, right?
Yeah.
And the law right now on that, obviously it's a gray area. These cases have been filed. One person's opinion, mine, is that we had this Google Oracle case that, spiraled for about a decade up and down to the Supreme Court a couple times, which kind of came out and was decided 3 years ago at the very beginning of the pandemic, which said that, which kind of leads me to believe that I think the scraping in and of itself might be considered fair use. And then that would lead us to, you got to focus on what the actual output is, right? And that's sort of where the law is today, right? So, and as you said, there are frameworks already, right? People have been sampling music for decades, right? And if you get If you sample too much and you're too close and you don't license, well, you'll get sued for
Yep.
copyright infringement, right? If you want to use something, right, like Vanilla Ice tried to use Under Pressure, 30 years ago, right? It didn't get a license, right? It ended up having to give away a bunch of the profits, right? So there's already a scheme and a structure in place for this stuff. But what I think YouTube and Universal are doing, and I think ultimately what the studios and the guilds and things and the unions going to have to figure out in Hollywood is, let's make a deal, right? Let's not leave it to the judiciary. Let's not rely on these pockets of the Copyright Act to figure out, how this stuff's going to work. Let's just do a deal, right? And I think what YouTube and Universal are doing is sort of something that, Grimes did on a much more grassroots basis a few months ago when she said, hey, listen, you want to use my voice in the song? That's fine. Pay me 50% of any profits, right? And people kind of laughed at that, but I think over the last few months, a lot of people have sort of stopped laughing at it and realized, okay, maybe she was onto something, because this is sort of anytime we have a new technology, people want to adopt it, right? And I think with this one, it being so powerful and so broadly useful across industries, right? Like Alex said before, I think striking a deal kind of allows people to then probably be adventurous in the short term with some assurances for shareholders that you're not going to end up in some, in a whole bunch of giant lawsuits.
Yeah. And it really could speed up the pace of innovation because, with things like smart contracts and being able to automatically distribute profits, like, hey, I used, these two chords of your song, I use your words from the song, I use this influence or whatever the case is, build these things into smart contracts. And as you're being paid out, from Spotify or iTunes or whoever else, like you pay all the other rights holders and immediately there's no waiting, there's this. So I think that there's, it's that double-edged sword, you've blockchain and kind of Web3 with AI can solve a lot of problems. But, Alex is something that you've spent a lot of time on. I think that traditional writers should be worried because even if we're not talking about using, existing things, people can extrapolate and work, by themselves much quicker than having, these giant teams writing and formatting and researching. What's your thoughts on kind of what's happening with Hollywood and the AI integration that's hitting it right now?
Yeah, I mean, in one way, I think this is a very exciting use case to combine Web3 and AI, so that being able to identify who the rights holders are, and then be able to distribute those profit back to the right people, and then do it in a scalable manner. I mean, I think it is also a fact that blockchain is not at that level of scale to actually do this with the masses of the kind of data that we're talking about. Thinking about the AI side, I am actually not that. I will be quite concerned being a creator and content holder. I think this is fair to ask for this, right? But if you look at because the current technology is actually very similar to the tech that DeepMind and even IBM was using many years ago for playing chess and playing Go, right? And what you observe is that the computer, the algorithm or the AI actually figure out or derive new moves from existing moves, right? So in a way, it didn't need to look at all the master's game. It just had to play itself long enough time. The algorithm figure out how to play a better game of Go that actually and playing moves that humans haven't thought about before. So you can imagine that in the content space, any kind of content, like writing, art, movies, so on, that basically every human being willing to, that can create some form of art, different levels of how good they are, but they would provide, there's enough people in the world that are willing to provide that their data basically for free for training, right? So so basically you just push the initial state to a lower form, but the whole iterative nature of AI is that it eventually arrives to the higher form. So I'm not sure that asking for rights distribution will get us there. It might be more of a delay than the actual problem, the actual solving a solution as a solution.
Awesome. Yeah. And Christian is a coder, your code is your art. How, and you've created some very, intricate, solutions and elegant solutions. How do you feel about, people being able to kind of reuse your code or anything like that?
I think at least in software development, there is a paradigm with open source, which already transitioned for a few years, right? So I think we are ahead of the curve, at least in the code. Like people are putting code out there and letting other communities to build on top. We have like the licenses that we currently have, at least in software development, are very clear. Like there are a bunch of them, like 7 to 10 probably, which are very known. Others can be derivations of that. But once you see an MIT on GPL or whatever license, you're pretty aware of the facts that you are able to do or not able to do. So at least in the code, I think we are a bit ahead of the curve. Now, back to the point, I think Alex pointed a very good, let's say, pain, the fact that there is not enough data in the space to train it and have that, let's say, start from the scratch very high. But I think with other technologies, even with homomorphic encryption, I'm aware of, let's say, projects which are using homomorphic encryption to train models using encrypted data. That means you can even train, let's say, your biometric data, right, with those models. The issue which comes after right now, at least right now, it's a performance issue because you require a great amount of computing power, and that's one downside. But then if you think over the, let's say, AI thoughts, is that once you bring in the value in the model, you can no longer remove it, right? So if you have a model trained, let's say, on 1,000 of, let's say, DNAs, you cannot remove, let's say, I want to remove my DNA. It's embedded in the model, so you cannot extract it. So I think right there are some options to work to enhance that, at least to have a tracking of the data that is being inferred in the model. Speaking of like largely, and I've seen an interesting project. I'm not a lawyer. I don't have this requirements like to understand specifically how it works, but I saw a project which, if you know how brute forcing a password does, right? You have A, B, and you generate all the combinations from 5 to 7 to 8 letters, right? And these guys were generating actually brute forcing songs based on Do, Re, Mi, right? So it has all the songs, and they generated so far like 5 billion songs, and they're like registering that data to have IP based on that, and they're helping other, let's say, artists that are losing rights on IP with those databases, and actually for the public good. But they could transform in the bad, let's say, scenario where you could brute force all the songs. You just put an IP on there, and then you're asking for fees just because I generated and traded market ahead of time, right? So I think we will see some interesting ideas in the space in the following years.
It's clear, as we talk about AI every week, and there's always a couple different perceptions. And by the way, that's our last article, so we're gonna kind of end here shortly. But I think it's really interesting to see that the world is going to take a very big turn, and whether you want to believe in it or not, this is the Web3, which is the next iteration of the internet. Web 1 was read, you can consume data. Web 2 was read write. You could, consume, and then you could also put things out for other people to see, such as Twitter and Facebook. And as Web 3, it's read, write, and own. And there's other tools around how you're going to create ownership there, and whether it's you're creating new content, whether you're acquiring content, whether you're acquiring wealth or assets, there's going to be this new tool set that's needed. And Google is clearly like, I hate using search engines now that aren't attached to an AI bot that allows me to kind of like filter through. And I think what's interesting is ChatGPT for a minute had being integrated, and I'd ask it some very simple questions, and you could see it like go to a website, reading, scrolling, going back, and go through all these articles, and they eventually turned it off, probably because it was so inefficient. And it showcased I think how bad some human generated content really was at explaining what these core questions were. So my point being is that the world is going to change. AI is a piece of the puzzle that we're going to see. But anyone who's, whether you're a content creator or content consumer or content acquirer, we all are going to to really have to rethink our lives. And it's going to be a very dynamic shift the smarter the stuff is. Because like, you know, if you're doing some very basic work, you know, it's time to get skilled in a variety of other areas. I mean, you really are going to have to take a look and say, you know, horse and buggies are going away. It's going to be, you know, gasoline vehicles. And so this is going to be one of those shifts that we're going to watch in real time happen, similar to others. Gentlemen, I thank you all for the time today. Is there any other closing thoughts you guys have on any of the articles we had as we roll out here through the end of this? Alex?
I mean, I think that's a good way to. It is a very quickly changing world that between even just AI and blockchain. So I'm excited to have the privilege to witness it and participate in it, and we'll see how it goes in the next 5-10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Cristian, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I'm very fortunate, as Alex mentioned, to be part of this and seeing the things happening, like the shift in lots of things. And I think the key idea is to be very adaptive to the things that are appearing to be open, and to see how you could embed those, let's say, technologies or at least new trends into the current ones that we have. That's my takeaway from this talk.
Awesome. And Vivek, bring us home.
Yeah, no, I agree with both everything Cristian and Alex are saying. And I think it's a very exciting time to just be sort of living in this kind of a world where things are evolving in this way. And I also think that it's always a good reminder that, you know, something like generative AI, which I do agree with you, Jay, is it not only has the power to transform, I think it's already transforming sort of this world that we're living in. But it's a tool for enhancement, right? It's not necessarily this tool for replacement, as so many people are concerned of. And I think when you talk about these last two things that we talked about, you know, music and then Hollywood, there is a huge factor here with the adoption of all this stuff, which is, you know, the way it works today, for example, is a musician, you know, or Cristian or anybody creating intellectual property are not going to simply allow anybody to use their IP for any reason, right? And that's because we are human beings and we have feelings and emotions and we have opinions about things. And so there's always going to be a little, you know, tug, which I think is a healthy, you know, give and take between technology and humans. And I think what's really unique, and if you look, I think, you know, if any of us are lucky enough to be alive 100 years from now, or some historian 200-300 years, you know, from in the future, are going to look back at, I think, this 20, 30, 40 years as a really exciting time where there were these first conversations between humans and technology that really kind of helped us break through into the future. And so I think it's you know, a very grateful thing for all of us to be able to participate in that discourse.
I love that. I've got my fingers crossed that we hit singularity while we're all still here on this planet, so we can exist for thousands of years without the consumption and everything else. So for everyone, thank you for the time. yWhales. We'll catch you guys next time. Take care.